Hey, I'm Nathan, and before we start, I want you to hold one number in your head. 0. Not a small number, not a low number. 0. That's how many student-on-student assaults a certain high school in Ohio reported to its state education department over 4 straight school years, and that 0 was worth $2.4 million in performance money. Here's the thing nobody tells you about numbers like that. A 0 on a form is not the absence of violence. A 0 is a decision. Somebody sat at a desk with a pen and decided that what happened in that building would not be written down. And once a thing is not written down, it did not happen. And once it did not happen, the boys who did it learned something no 15-year-old should ever have to learn from the inside of a bathroom stall. This story is about a father who spent 21 years in a profession where the entire job is seeing a thing clearly, writing it down, and waiting. It's about what happens when a school picks a fight with the one kind of man who does not need to shout because he has already started taking measurements. It's about a small notebook, a survey tripod parked legally on a county right-of-way, and an insurance clause that nobody in that district ever bothered to read. Stay with me to the end, because the last thing this father teaches his son is the whole reason I wanted to tell you this one. Kellen Ledbetter measured things for a living, and he was very good at it. And that is the only sentence you need to understand everything that happened in Ashfall County in the spring of that year. He had come home to Cutler Bend at 44, with 21 years behind him, most of them spent lying still. People in town knew he'd been a Navy man, and they knew it had been something serious, because the VFW guys got quiet in a particular way when he walked in, and because he never told a single story. What he told them, if they asked, was that he ran a survey outfit. Ledbetter Land and Boundary. 1 truck, 1 man. A Trimble total station in a foam case that cost more than the truck. And a reputation in 3 counties for never being wrong. Farmers hired him for fence line disputes that had been simmering since their grandfathers. Attorneys hired him when a case was going to turn on 11 inches. He'd stand in a soybean field in the rain for 6 hours to shoot 1 point correctly, and then he'd stand there another 20 minutes to shoot it again. Because a measurement you only took once is a rumor. That was the whole architecture of the man. See it. Write it down. Check it. Wait. His wife Charla had been gone 4 years by then. An aneurysm, on a Tuesday, in the kitchen, with the radio on. There had been no warning, and no enemy, and nothing to do about it. And Kellen had learned in that year that the hardest thing in the world is a target you cannot range. What he had left was a son. Brantley Ledbetter was 15, and everyone but his father called him Brant. He was a quiet, watchful, slightly stooped kid who had inherited his mother's eyes and his father's terrible habit of noticing everything. He played third-chair trumpet in a marching band that was not very good, and he loved it anyway. He shot photos for the yearbook, which in a school like Cutler Bend High meant he shot everything, all year, every event, because nobody else wanted to. He carried a scratched-up second-hand camera on a strap his mother had sewn, and he had a spiral notebook in his back pocket, and the notebook is the reason for everything that follows, though nobody knew that yet, including Brant. The hospital called at 2:41 on a Thursday afternoon. Kellen was in a bean field on the Amberley parcel with the rod in his hand, and his phone buzzed against his leg, and the number was the county medical center, and he answered it standing up straight because some part of him already knew. "Mr. Ledbetter, this is Rhonda Amberley. I'm the charge nurse in our emergency department. Your son Brantley is here. I need you to come now, and I need you to drive like a person who is going to arrive." He said, "What happened?" There was the smallest pause on the line, and in that pause, he heard a woman deciding whether to be careful or to be honest, and she chose honest, and he never forgot her for it. 12 students beat him in a bathroom at his school, she said. He has a bleed in his brain. He has no movement below the waist. Mr. Ledbetter, the school did not send him here. A janitor found him, and a math teacher put him in her own car. He said, "Thank you, ma'am." He said it flatly, and he folded the tripod, and he set the total station in its foam, and he closed the case and latched both latches, because a man who does not do the next correct thing under pressure is a man who is about to make a mistake. Then he got in the truck and drove 41 miles in 28 minutes. He would think about that phone call for the rest of his life, and not for the reason you'd expect, not because of the words, because of who said them. The hospital called first. The school never called at all. The emergency department at Ashfall County Medical smelled like floor stripper and old coffee, and Rhonda Amberly met him at the doors because she had been watching for a truck. She was maybe 50, built like a fence post, with the particular calm of a woman who has held a lot of people's worst afternoons in her two hands. "He's in imaging," she said, walking fast. "Dr. Everly is our pediatric neurosurgeon, and she is the best thing in this building. I need to tell you some things before you see him, and I need you to let me finish. Go." He came in with a subdural hematoma. That's bleeding between the brain and the covering of the brain, and it's putting pressure where pressure doesn't belong. She may need to relieve that pressure tonight. He also has a fracture and cord involvement at T10, mid-back. Right now he has no motor function below that level, and he can't feel his legs. She stopped walking and made him look at her. "I'm not going to tell you it's going to be fine. I'm going to tell you that what I know right now is what I just said, and the rest is not knowledge yet. It's fear. Don't spend energy on fear tonight. You'll need it," he said. "Understood. You're a Navy guy," she said. Somebody said, 21 years. She nodded once, like that settled a private question. "Then you already know how to sit still while somebody else works." Dr. Calliope Everly came out at 6. She was small and blunt, and had the flat, unhurried voice of a person who has said hard things to 100 parents and never once let herself say them in a hurry. She drew Kellen a picture on the back of a consent form because she'd learned that people remember pictures. "The bleed is here," she said, and drew it. "It's not enormous. It's in a bad neighborhood. I want to watch it for 6 hours, and I want you to understand that if his pupil changes, we're going to the OR in 4 minutes, not 40. That's the brain." She drew a second thing, a line with a mark on it. "This is the spine. This is T10. There's a burst fracture here, and there's swelling around the cord. Tomorrow I'll stabilize it with hardware. What I cannot tell you tonight, or tomorrow, or in a week, is how much of that cord is bruised, and how much of it is finished. That answer takes months, and it comes back in millimeters." Kellen looked at the drawing for a long moment. Then he said the first thing that had come out of him that felt like himself. "So it's a survey," he said. "You take the shot, you take it again, and you don't guess in between." Dr. Everly looked up at him with something like relief. "Yes," she said. "That's exactly what it is." They let him in at 8. Brant was small in the bed in a way that Kellen had not seen since the boy was 7 with the flu, and the whole right side of his face was the color of a storm, and there was a bandage over his ear where they'd shaved a patch, and there was a cage of pillows keeping his body in one line. His hands were fine. That was the strange, cruel detail. His hands were completely fine, resting on the blanket, unmarked, the fingernails still with the black rim of darkroom chemical he refused to stop using. He was awake. His eyes tracked over and found his father, and the boy's face did something that broke Kellen Ledbetter more thoroughly than the phone call had. He looked guilty. "Dad," Brant said. His voice was wrecked. "I didn't tell them." "Didn't tell them what, bud?" "Where it is." He swallowed, and it cost him. "They wanted the card. I didn't tell them." Kellen sat down in the chair beside the bed and took one of those unmarked hands in both of his, gently, the way you'd hold a level you didn't want to knock out of true. "Okay," he said. "Then we'll start there." He did not ask another question that night. That was the discipline of him, and it was the hardest thing he ever did. A frightened man asks 11 questions in a row and gets 11 pieces of a boy's panic. A patient man waits until morning and gets the truth in order. So he sat, and he watched the monitor, and every hour a nurse came in and shined a light in his son's eyes, and every hour Kellen checked the clock and made a small mark on the back of Dr. Everly's drawing. By 4 in the morning there were 8 marks in a row. By 4 in the morning he had also, without deciding to, started a second list, in his head, in the dark, in the language he had used for 21 years. Not a list of names. He didn't have names yet. A list of unknowns. Distance, elevation, wind, who benefits, what gets written down, and who holds the pen. Around 5, the door opened and a woman came in who was not a nurse. She was in her 40s, hair still wet, wearing a school district polo under a coat like she'd dressed in a hurry, and she was carrying a laminated visitor badge she had clearly issued to herself. She looked at the boy in the bed, and her chin went. and she got it under control. "Mr. Ledbetter, I'm Marley Vosberg. I'm the nurse at Cutler Bend High." She said it, and then stood there like a person waiting to be thrown out. "Ma'am, I want you to know that nobody sent me," she said. "In fact, I'd say the opposite is true." She looked at Brant again, and then she said the sentence that turned the whole thing, though neither of them knew it for 11 more days. "Mr. Ledbetter, I have been the nurse in that building for 6 years, and this is the 41st time I've treated a student for injuries from another student, and I need you to understand something." Her voice was shaking now, and she pushed straight through it. "I have never once seen one of my reports come back with a case number on it. Not one. In 6 years. Kellen turned in the chair and looked at her properly for the first time. "Say that again," he said. 41, she said. "And how many did the school report to the state?" Marley Vosberg's mouth went thin. "You can look that up," she said. "It's public. That's the part that made me get in my car at 4 in the morning and drive here." She set a business card on the tray table, hospital issue pen beside it, and her hand was shaking so badly the card went crooked. "You can look up exactly what my building told the state of Ohio for the last 4 years." Then she left, and Kellen Ledbetter sat in the dark next to his paralyzed son and looked at that crooked business card for a long time. At 6:15 in the morning, he took out his phone and found the Ohio School Safety Data Portal, which is a boring public website that almost nobody has ever visited on purpose, and he typed in Cutler Bend High School, and he scrolled to the line item that says student-on-student violent incidents, and he looked at 4 school years in a row. 0, 0, 0, 0. He sat with that. Outside the window, the sky was going gray over the parking lot, and a man in scrubs was scraping frost off a windshield. 41 in the nurse's office. 0 on the form. He didn't feel rage, exactly. What he felt was the specific, cold, almost pleasant click of a range finally resolving in the reticle. 21 years of his life had trained him to recognize one particular sensation above all others, and it is not anger. It's the moment a blur becomes a number. He had been trying to figure out who hurt his son. The website had just told him something far more useful. Somebody in that building had a reason to keep this off paper, and a man who needs a thing kept off paper will always, always do something stupid to keep it there. He got the rest of it out of Brant on Saturday morning, in order, the way he'd wanted to. The photo essay had been Brant's idea in October. The yearbook advisor wanted something about school spirit, and Brant had gotten bored with the pep rally pictures and started shooting the weight room instead, at 6 in the morning, because that's when the football team lifted and the light through the high windows was good. He'd shot it for weeks. He liked it there. Nobody talked to him, and the barbells made a sound he liked, and he got some frames he was actually proud of. In January, he shot something else. There was a routine in that weight room that the boys called Tuesdays. If a sophomore missed a lift, or mouthed off, or was simply new, the seniors ran him through Tuesdays, which involved a wall, a plate rack, and a length of toe strap, and Brant had a picture of it. And in the picture, in the background, leaning against the doorframe with a clipboard and a coffee, was the assistant coach. Jared Vandermeer wasn't stopping it. He wasn't participating. He was standing there the way a foreman stands at a job site. Brant, being his mother's son, had felt sick. Brant, being his father's son, had not said a word to anybody. He had gone home and made a page in his spiral notebook and written the date, the time, who was there, and what he saw, and then he had gone back the next week and done it again. He had, without ever using the word, opened a survey book. By March there were 19 entries, and then in March he'd done the thing that got him hurt, and it was such a small thing, such a 15-year-old thing, that Kellen had to put his forehead down on the bed rail when the boy said it. Brant had gone to the February school board meeting, not to speak, to take pictures, for the yearbook, of the board members, which was on his assignment list. And while he was there, bored, sitting in a folding chair in the back of a cafeteria, he had listened to Superintendent Denise Kingsbury stand up and present a slide, and the slide had a big number on it. 0. And Brant Ledbetter, 15 years old, third chair trumpet, had looked at that slide, and then down at the spiral notebook in his own back pocket that had 19 entries in it, and he had raised his camera and photographed the slide, because his brain worked the way his father's brain worked, and the first thing that brain does when two numbers disagree, is preserve both of them. I was going to send it to the state, Brant said. There's an email on the safety portal. I was going to send it in April, after basketball, so it wouldn't be about basketball. Who knew? Kellen said. Brant's eyes went to the ceiling and stayed there. Bud, who knew? Deuce, he said. Trent Pomeroy Jr. He sits behind me in chem. Brant's mouth twisted. He's not the worst one. He just wanted his dad to think he was useful. He saw the notebook. He read a page. He asked me what it was, and I told him, because I'm an idiot. Deuce told his father. His father is Principal Trent Pomeroy. 6 days later, 12 boys followed Brant into the second-floor bathroom in D Hall between 5th and 6th period, and Hayden Fitch, who was 18 years old and had already signed a letter of intent to a college he would never attend, held out his hand and said, "Card." Brant said no. They wanted the SD card out of his camera. They took the camera and there was nothing in it. So they asked him where, and he wouldn't say. And 12 boys who had learned across 4 years that nothing in that building ever got written down asked him again. The whole thing lasted, by the janitor's estimate, under 3 minutes. "Where is it?" Kellen asked, very quietly. "The card." Brant almost smiled. It was awful, and it was the most beautiful thing his father had ever seen. "You're gonna be mad." "I promise you I'm not. It's taped inside the lid of your rod case," Brant said. "The old one, the aluminum one, in the truck. Because you always say nobody ever looks in a case that's already latched." Kellen Ledbetter sat there for about 10 seconds. Then he got up and kissed his son on the unbruised side of his forehead and went out to the parking lot and opened the aluminum case that had been sitting behind his seat for 11 days. Through the whole thing, through the drive to the hospital, through everything. It was there, a little black card in a strip of gaffer tape, the way a kid tapes a spare key. He put it in his shirt pocket, and he buttoned the pocket, and he stood in the parking lot in the cold for a minute, with his hand flat over it. Then he drove to the school. He wanted to be clear, later, when people asked him, about what he intended when he walked into Cutler Bend High School that Saturday morning. He had not come to threaten anyone. He had come to do the single most ordinary thing a parent can do, which is stand in front of the adult responsible for a building and ask what happened to his child in it. And he had come, if he was honest, to give that man exactly one chance to be a decent human being. Trent Pomeroy was in the building because there was a wrestling meet in the gym. He came down the main hall in a quarter zip with the school logo on it, and Kellen watched him make the calculation from 30 feet out. He watched the man's shoulders square. He watched him decide, in advance, what kind of conversation this was going to be. Pomeroy stopped in his own office doorway and stood in it, filled it, put a hand up on the frame. That detail mattered to Kellen more than anything the man said, and he thought about it for weeks afterward. Pomeroy blocked his own doorway, not the hallway, not the exit, his own office door, where the filing cabinets were. "Mr. Ledbetter," warm voice. "Sorry for your loss," voice. "I've been meaning to reach out. It's been 11 days. There's a process. My son is paralyzed. And we are all sick about it," Pomeroy said, "and I want you to hear me. This is an internal matter. We handle things internally. It's a student discipline issue, and there are privacy laws that protect those students, and I'm not permitted, legally, to discuss any of it with you. 12 of them. I'm not confirming a number. You never called me. Our protocol is to contact the parent listed on the emergency card, and I'm told there was an attempt. There was no attempt." Pomeroy's face did the thing. Kellen had seen that face in 4 countries. It's the face of a man who has just realized he is not going to be able to talk his way out, and who decides, in that instant, to stop trying and start enjoying himself instead. He leaned on the doorframe and let his voice drop into something almost friendly. "Look, I know your background. Everybody in this town knows your background. You make sure of that, don't you? With the truck and the flag decal." He smiled. "So let me be real with you. This is a school, not a war. You don't have jurisdiction here, and there's no mission, and there's nobody for you to go get. So what are you gonna do, soldier boy? Huh? What are you gonna do?" Kellen Ledbetter did not respond. That is not a figure of speech, and it is not the polite version. He said nothing. He did not raise his voice or his hands or his chin. He stood in that hallway under the fluorescent lights, next to a trophy case full of dusty football hardware, and he looked at Trent Pomeroy for 4 full seconds. And in those 4 seconds, he did what he had been trained to do 10,000 times, which is to stop looking at a man and start reading a position. He noted the office door the man was covering with his body. He noted the camera in the hall ceiling, and the second one over the main doors, and the little sticker on the ceiling tile that said the retention period for the district's video system, because it was right there, and a man who reads survey plats reads everything. He noted, through the open door behind Pomeroy, a bookshelf, and on the bookshelf, a black 3-ring binder with a printed spine label he could read from where he stood. Safe halls. YR4. Grant compliance. Then he turned around and walked out. Pomeroy called something after him down the hallway, and the sound of it bounced off the lockers, and Kellen did not turn around, and later 3 separate people would tell the state investigator that the principal had laughed. That was the last time Trent Pomeroy ever got to speak to Kellen Ledbetter without a lawyer in the room. Here is what people misunderstand about the job Kellen had done for 21 years, and it's why every single person in Ashfall County guessed wrong about what was coming. They thought the skill was the shot. The shot is about 4% of it. The rest is the part nobody makes movies about. It's lying in a scrape in the dirt for 3 days with a notebook, writing down what time the dogs bark, which door the fuel truck uses, what the wind does at the bottom of the draw at 4 in the afternoon versus 6. It's building, slowly and patiently, a completely accurate picture of a place. Snipers do not win because they are violent. They win because they are the only person in the valley who is being honest about the numbers. Kellen Ledbetter did not go home that Saturday and start planning revenge. He went home and started a survey book. He bought a case of copy paper and a box of manila folders, and he set up 2 folding tables in the dining room where the table used to be when Charla was alive. And on the wall behind them, he hung a roll of white plotter paper 8 feet long, and at the top of it, he wrote 2 words in carpenter's pencil, in block letters, the way he labels a plat. What happened? What was written? 2 columns. That was the entire architecture of the next 5 weeks. Then he did the least dramatic, most devastating thing available to an American citizen, which is that he sat down at a kitchen laptop and started filing public records requests. He filed 19 of them in the first 4 days, and each one was short, specific, and correctly cited, because he had spent an evening reading the Ohio Public Records statute the way he'd once read range cards. He asked for the district's Safe Halls grant application and all 4 annual performance reports. He asked for the incident data submission files. He asked for the school nurse's aggregate visit logs. He asked for the video retention policy and the maintenance contract for the camera system. He asked for the board's executive session minutes index. He asked for the district's certificate of insurance and the declarations page of its liability policy, which is a public record, which almost nobody knows, and which was the single most important piece of paper in this entire story. He asked for every one of them in writing. He kept a copy of every request. He noted the date, the time, the recipient, and the statutory response deadline in a green field book, in pencil, in his tight square hand. Distance, elevation, wind. And then, because a man who has spent his life waiting knows that the waiting is the work, he did the other thing. Every weekday morning at 7:20, for the next 5 weeks, Kellen Ledbetter set up a survey tripod on the county right-of-way across the road from Cutler Bend High School, and he worked. It was not a stunt. That's what nobody could ever get their head around. He had an actual signed contract with an actual landowner, a farmer named Occam who was splitting 40 acres for his daughters, and had been meaning to get the north boundary re-established for 9 years. The boundary ran along the road frontage directly opposite the school. It was a real job with a real deed and a real chain of title going back to an 1871 patent, and Kellen billed for it, and it took, as boundary work sometimes does, an extremely long time. So every morning he stood there in a reflective vest with his tripod and his prism pole while 800 kids got dropped off, and he wrote in his field book, and at 3:05 in the afternoon he came back and stood there again while they left. He never crossed the road. He never spoke to a student. He never photographed anyone. He just stood there, perfectly legally, in high visibility orange, measuring. By day 4, the principal called the sheriff. By day 6, the sheriff, a tired man named Boyd, who had known Kellen's father, came out and stood next to him for a while and looked at the school and said, "You're gonna make me do this." I know it. You got a contract? Kellen handed him a folder. Signed survey agreement, deed reference, right-of-way permit from the county engineer, professional surveyor license, insurance certificate. Boyd read all of it, slowly, and then he handed it back and looked at the school again for a long moment. How's your boy? Alive? Yeah. Boyd got back in his cruiser. He put the window down. Ledbetter. Off the record. That man in there is calling my dispatch twice a day about a licensed surveyor standing in a ditch. That's interesting, Kellen said. It surely is, said the sheriff, and drove away. Nobody at Cutler Bend High ever laid a hand on the man. Nobody could. He was doing paperwork on the side of a road. But every single morning, for 5 weeks, Trent Pomeroy pulled into his reserved space and got out of his car, and there was a man in an orange vest 300 feet away with an instrument on a tripod, and the instrument was pointed at the property line, and the principal could never quite make himself believe that. There is a word for what that is. It isn't threat, it's presence. Kellen wrote it in the green field book on the 9th morning, in the margin, next to a bearing, and it's the closest he ever came to writing down how he felt. He hasn't done anything wrong yet. He's just started behaving like a man who has. The records started coming back in week 2, and they came back exactly the way a guilty building answers a question, which is late, partial, and in a way designed to be exhausting. The district's response to his first 8 requests was a single PDF of 410 pages, unbookmarked, out of order, scanned crooked, with 3 separate documents printed on top of each other. It was the paper equivalent of a shrug. It was meant to make a man in a ranch house with a laptop give up. Kellen printed all 410 pages and cut them apart and sorted them on the floor of the dining room into piles by document type and then by date, and then he sat cross-legged in the middle of it for 2 nights with a highlighter, and on the second night, at around 11 o'clock, he found it. The Safe Halls Grant. It was a state program, funded with a federal pass-through, and the idea behind it was actually decent, which is the part that made him angriest. It gave money to districts to reduce school violence. But whoever designed the payout structure had made the mistake that people who design payout structures always make. They didn't pay for reducing violence. They paid for reported reductions in violence. $2.4 million over 4 years, dispersed annually, and each annual disbursement was contingent on the district's reported student-on-student violent incident rate remaining at or below a benchmark. Cutler Bend's baseline year had been a mess, 31 incidents. Then the grant started. Year 1, 2. Year 2, 0. Year 3, 0. Year 4, 0. Kellen sat on his dining room floor at 11 at night with a highlighter in his hand and looked at that column of numbers, and he understood that he was looking at a confession. Nobody reduces school violence by 94% in 12 months and then to nothing forever. That is not a curve that exists in nature. That is a man with a pen. Then he found the second thing, which was worse. Page 288 of the grant application. In the district's own narrative section, under a heading called Sustainability and Accountability, there was a paragraph describing the district's administrator incentive structure. Building principals received an annual performance supplement tied in part to their building's safety metrics. Trent Pomeroy's supplement, in year 4, had been $18,000. Denise Kingsbury's, as superintendent, had been $34,000. And on page 301, in an appendix nobody was ever supposed to read, there was a list of the program's community partners, which is a polite term for the local businesses whose sponsorship logos went on the banner. Third from the top, Tillman Auto Group. Kurt Tillman, who owned it, was also the president of the school board. His dealership's floor plan financing, the bank line that lets a car dealer keep 400 cars on a lot he hasn't paid for yet, had been renewed twice in 3 years on the strength of a community partnership profile that led with his Safe Schools work. Kellen put the highlighter down. He got up off the floor, and he went and stood at the 8-foot roll of plotter paper on the wall, and under what was written he drew a column, and at the top of the column he wrote a dollar figure, and then he drew a line from that figure down to a small box at the bottom, and in the box he wrote 3 words, "My son's spine." He looked at it for a long time. Then he went to bed, because he had to be at the road with the tripod at 7:20. The nurse came on a Sunday, in her own car, and she brought a shoebox. Marley Vosberg had been keeping carbon copies for 6 years. Not out of some grand plan. Out of the small, unglamorous fear of a woman who had been told once, early, by a previous principal, that she'd documented herself into a corner, and who had decided quietly that she was never going to be the only person in a room without a copy. Every time she treated a kid for an injury caused by another kid, she filled out the district's incident form. She sent the original up the hall, and she kept the yellow carbon in a shoebox in the trunk of her Corolla, and when the shoebox got full, she took it home and started another one. There were 4 boxes. She put them on Kellen Ledbetter's dining room table and stood there with her arms crossed and her chin going. 41, she said. I counted them again last night. 41 in 6 years. 2 of them were girls. 3 of them ended up in an ambulance. One of them was a kid named Wells in my 2nd year, who transferred out to Steubenville, and I have never once stopped thinking about him. She wiped her face with the back of her wrist, angry at herself. And every single one of these has my signature on it, and a routing line that says it went to the principal's office. Why now, ma'am? Because I've been telling myself for 6 years that somebody upstairs was handling it, she said, and then on the 14th of March, I put a 15-year-old on a gurney, and the school did not call his father. Kellen looked at the 4 shoeboxes. Then he did something he'd been trained to do and had never once had to use in a dining room in Ohio. He said, "Ma'am, I need you to stop talking for a second and let me tell you what happens next, because it's going to happen to you, not just to me." He told her, if she gave him those boxes, and he did what he was going to do with them, she was going to lose her job. Not immediately. There'd be a reorganization, or a scheduling issue, or her position would be consolidated with the middle school. She'd get a letter that used the word restructuring. It would happen 4 to 6 months out, and it would be legally airtight, and it would be entirely because of this. So before you give me a single page, he said, you go home and you talk to whoever you need to talk to about money, and you come back if you still want to. She stared at him. You're trying to talk me out of it? No, ma'am. I'm arranging it for you. There's a difference. She came back at 7 that night with a 5th box and a legal pad with her own timeline on it, and she said, my husband says do it. And that was the end of that discussion. But it was still not enough, and Kellen knew it. And this is the part where most people would have gone to the newspaper and lost. Because here's what he had: a nurse's private carbons, which the district would call unverified duplicates, a public data portal showing zeros, which the district would call a data entry issue, and blame on a departed secretary, a grant application, which was just a document, and a 15-year-old spiral notebook, which a lawyer would take apart in 9 minutes. What he did not have was the one thing that turns a scandal into a crime. He did not have proof that a specific adult had made a specific decision to not write something down. He needed somebody inside. She came to him. That's the part he never got over. On the 18th morning at the tripod, a girl walked across the road from the student lot before first bell. 16 maybe. Green canvas jacket, hair in a knot, a phone gripped in both hands like a bird. She stopped about 10 feet away, on the shoulder, and said, "Are you Brant's dad?" He said, "I am." "I'm Renly Pomeroy," she said, and watched his face for what it would do. It didn't do anything. "I've got 2 things," she said, in a rush. "And then I'm going back inside, and you can't ever say it was me until you can prove it another way. Okay? That's the deal. That's the deal, or I walk." That's the deal. Renly Pomeroy had been documenting her own brother for 11 months. Not because she was brave, she said, because she was tired. Because Deuce had come home in the fall of his junior year different, gassed up on being one of Vandermeer's guys, and because she had watched what he was becoming and had no one to say it to, since the only adult in that house was the principal. So she had a folder on her phone, time-stamped, videos of her brother and his friends in her own driveway, audio she'd recorded at the kitchen table without anybody noticing, because nobody notices a 16-year-old girl with a phone. And on the 14th of March, at 12:52 in the afternoon, she had been standing at the far end of D Hall when 12 boys went into the second-floor bathroom behind Brant Ledbetter. She hadn't filmed inside. She wanted him to know that. She'd been too scared, and she'd hated herself for it ever since. She'd filmed the door. 2 minutes and 40 seconds of a bathroom door in an empty hallway, with sound. And then the other thing, she said, and her voice finally broke. That night, at our house, My dad was on the phone in his office, and I was in the hallway, and I recorded it, because I record everything now. That's just what I do now. She played 4 seconds of it, and Kellen Ledbetter, standing in an orange vest on the county right-of-way with a survey instrument at his hip, heard the principal of Cutler Bend High School say, in a tired, reasonable, everyday voice, to someone on the other end of a phone, "No, no, don't code it as an assault. Code it as a medical. Kid had an event in the bathroom. That's all this is. Get Marley's form and hold it on my desk. Don't route it." Renly took the phone back and put it in her jacket and stood there shaking. "Is that enough?" she said. Kellen Ledbetter was quiet for a second. Then he said something that she repeated, years later, on a witness stand, and again in a scholarship essay, and again to her own kids. "Ma'am, that's not enough. That's the shot. But you don't take the shot when you have it. You take it when everything else is already in position, or you just make noise and they move." He said, "I need 11 more days." She said, "For what?" He said, "For them to be standing where I need them to be standing." Here is what he did with the 11 days, and it is the reason 12 boys disappeared out of a high school in 72 hours and never came back to it. The instinct, the human instinct, the one every parent in America would have had, is to take Renly's 4 seconds of audio and put it on the internet at 9 o'clock that night. And if he had, here is exactly what would have happened, and Kellen mapped it out on the plotter paper in advance, because that's what he does. The district's lawyer would have called it an out-of-context recording of a private conversation. Pomeroy would have been placed on paid administrative leave, which is a vacation. The board would have hired an independent investigator, chosen by the board's own insurance carrier, and that investigator would have taken 8 months and produced a report finding process failures and no individual misconduct. Kingsbury would have retired with her pension. The 12 boys would have gotten 5-day suspensions and graduated on time, and the Ledbetters would have gotten a settlement offer with a non-disclosure clause attached, which is the American method of turning a paralyzed child into a filing cabinet. That's the shot that misses. So instead, Kellen Ledbetter spent 11 days doing the least emotionally satisfying thing a father has ever done, which was arithmetic. He built what he still calls, privately, the firing solution. 6 pages, handwritten, in the green field book. And the core of it was a single paragraph he had found on a public document that the district's own lawyer had almost certainly never read all the way through. The declarations page of the Ashfall County Joint Schools Liability Policy. Every district in America is insured. That insurance is the reason nothing ever really happens to anybody. The carrier pays, the lawyers settle, the administrators keep their houses. But every one of those policies has exclusions, and on page 9 of this one, in a paragraph titled Exclusion 14, Knowing Concealment and Fraudulent Reporting, the carrier stated that coverage did not extend to any loss arising from an insured's intentional falsification or concealment of records required to be submitted to a governmental body in connection with the receipt of public funds. Read that again slowly, because Kellen did, about 40 times. If the district had merely been negligent, if 12 boys had beaten a kid and the school had handled it badly, the insurance company would have paid, and the adults would have been fine. But if it could be established that the district had knowingly falsified state safety reports in order to keep $2.4 million, then the carrier's coverage vanished. Retroactively. For everything connected to it. No coverage means no defense counsel paid for by the carrier. It means the settlement doesn't come out of a policy. It comes out of the district's general fund, which means a school levy, which means every household in Ashfall County gets a bill for what Trent Pomeroy decided not to write down. And it means that the individuals, the principal, the superintendent, the coach, the board president who voted on the grant, the 18-year-old boys who are legally adults, are personally, individually, uninsured defendants. Kellen Ledbetter had spent 21 years learning that you do not aim at a man. You aim at the thing holding him up. He wasn't going after 12 boys. He was going after the umbrella. On the 9th of the 11 days, Kellen called a man he hadn't spoken to in 6 years. Denny Ockham had been his spotter for 2 deployments and was now a 48-year-old divorced guy in Zanesville who flew thermal drones for a rural electric co-op, inspecting transmission lines for hot splices. He listened to about 90 seconds of it and then said, "What do you need?" "Nothing illegal." "That's disappointing." "I mean it, Den. Everything I do from here has to survive a hostile lawyer reading it out loud in a room. Then what do you need me for? I need somebody to tell me when I'm about to feel good, Kellen said. Because every time I've felt good in the last 3 weeks, it's been right before I was about to do something stupid. There was a pause on the line, and then Occam said, in a completely different voice, "Yeah, okay. I'll come stay in your spare room." He drove down that night, and for the next 9 days, Denny Occam's entire job was to sit at the second folding table with a cup of coffee and say, roughly twice a day, "That one's for you, not for the boy." And every time he said it, Kellen crossed a line off the plan. The things that got crossed off, in Kellen's own handwriting, in the green field book, Fitch's truck, Vandermeer's house, the weight room, the letter to the college, the thing at the dealership. 9 items in all, and next to each of them, in Occam's blockier hand, one word: vanity. That list is the reason a man who could have burned that town to the ground instead walked into a state office building on a Tuesday morning with 4 cardboard boxes and a flash drive. The 17th of April, 9:45 in the morning. Kellen Ledbetter delivered 5 identical packages, by hand and by certified courier, all within a 40-minute window, and the simultaneity was the entire weapon. Package 1 went to Tanya Delgado, an accountability auditor at the Ohio Department of Education, whose email address was published on the same public portal Brandt had been planning to use. It contained the 4 annual grant reports, the nurse's 41 carbons, and a 2-page cover memo written in the driest, flattest language Kellen could manage, because he had learned that outrage makes a bureaucrat defensive and arithmetic makes a bureaucrat afraid. Package 2 went to the Special Prosecutions section of the Ohio Attorney General's office, and it contained everything in Package 1, plus the audio, plus a sworn affidavit from Marley Vosberg, plus a chain of custody log for every item, dated and initialed, the way you log a range card. Package 3 went to the federal pass-through office that had funded the state program, with a single sentence at the top of the memo: "This is a notice of potential misuse of federal funds." Package 4 went to the district's insurance carrier's fraud unit, not to the claims department, the fraud unit, with exclusion 14 printed, highlighted, and clipped to the front. And Package 5, this is the one that made the sheriff laugh out loud when he heard about it 2 weeks later. Package 5 went, by certified mail, to the parents of all 12 boys. Not a threat, not a word of anger in it. It was a photocopy of Exclusion 14 and a 1-page plain English explanation that their sons were, as of that morning, likely uninsured defendants in a case where the district's coverage was in the process of being voided, and that they should each retain independent counsel immediately, because the district's lawyer was not their lawyer and never had been. Kellen Ledbetter did not attack 12 families. He informed them, accurately, that the people they had trusted to protect their children had just spent 4 years building the machine that was now going to eat them, and he gave them the paperwork, and then he went home and sat with his son. 72 hours. That's how long it took. Wednesday morning, the state auditor's office issued a preservation directive to the district, a legal order not to destroy documents, which lands in a school administrator's inbox with roughly the sound of a car hitting a house. Wednesday afternoon, the carrier issued a reservation of rights letter, which is insurance language for "we are no longer sure we're on your side," and the district's outside counsel withdrew from 3 matters in one email. Thursday at 6 a.m., agents from the AG's office and the state auditor's investigative unit walked into Cutler Bend High School with a warrant, went past the trophy case, and took the black 3-ring binder off the shelf in the principal's office, along with 2 file cabinets and the server in the closet behind the attendance desk. Thursday at 9:15, 12 sets of parents, each now individually represented by 12 different lawyers, who had each read Exclusion 14 overnight, and each independently arrived at the same conclusion, began doing what any lawyer tells a client to do when their child is an uninsured defendant in a case with criminal exposure. Get him out of that building, out of that town, out of the reach of a subpoena served at a school address. By Friday afternoon, all 12 were gone. 3 of them, Hayden Fitch, Trey Tillman, and Cass Vandermeer, all 18, were in custody, arraigned as adults on felonious assault, and, in Fitch's case, an additional count for what he said on the recording Renly's phone had picked up through the bathroom door. 4 more were removed to a juvenile detention facility 90 minutes away. 2 were pulled by their families and enrolled within a week at schools in 2 other states. 3 simply vanished from the enrollment rolls in the way that families vanish when a lawyer says the word deposition, and Cutler Bend never saw them again. The town, being a town, told it the way towns tell things. 12 boys went into that school on a Wednesday, and by the weekend, not one of them was ever seen there again, and everybody knew the SEAL had done it, and nobody could say how. The rumors got bad. Kellen let them. He never corrected a single one, and Denny Ockham, who had a mean streak, once got asked point blank at the Sunoco what happened to those boys, and he took a long drink of his coffee and said, he ranged 'em, and walked out, and that version was in 3 counties by Monday. The truth was in a manila folder, and the truth was worse, because the truth was that a man had read the documents. Now, the fathers. They came on the 11th night after the arrests, which was a Tuesday, at 11:40 p.m., and there were 6 of them in 3 trucks, and they stopped at the head of Kellen Ledbetter's gravel lane, 440 feet from his porch. Kurt Tillman, whose son was in the county jail and whose dealership had lost its floor plan financing 9 days earlier when the bank's risk committee read a headline. Jared Vandermeer, who had been placed on unpaid leave and indicted that morning. Hayden Fitch's father and uncle. 2 others. 4 of them had rifles. Tillman had a pistol on his hip and a bottle in him. Here is what those 6 men did not know, and it is the single most important paragraph in this story. On the first morning of the survey job, 5 weeks before any of this, Kellen Ledbetter had done what he does on every long boundary survey, which is set monuments and protect them. When you re-establish a property corner in a place where somebody is angry about the line, you set an iron pin, you cap it, and you put up a trail camera aimed at it, because pulled pins are the single most common form of survey vandalism in rural Ohio, and because a licensed surveyor who loses a monument loses a lawsuit. There were 4 cameras on the Ledbetter place. All 4 had been in service for 38 days. All 4 were documented in the survey file with GPS coordinates, install dates, and photographs of the installation, because that is what a professional does. They were not a trap. They had been there before there was anything to trap. That is the difference between a man planning something and a man who simply lives correctly, and no lawyer on earth ever managed to make it sound like anything else. And 110 feet up and about a quarter mile off, in the dark, with a thermal camera and a co-op work order in his lap for a transmission line inspection he was genuinely getting paid for, Denny Ockham was flying. The dogs went off at 11:39. Kellen came out of the house at 11:41. He was not armed. He would say later, under oath, that this was the hardest decision of his adult life, and that he made it 11 days in advance and wrote it down so he couldn't unmake it in the moment. There were 3 ways this ended, he'd told Ockham. In one of them, he wins the fight and goes to prison, and his son ages out of the system alone. In one of them, he loses the fight and dies, and his son ages out of the system alone. And in the third one, 6 angry men stand at the end of a lane at midnight and say every single thing they came to say, on camera, in a state with a one-party consent law, to a man who is holding a survey rod. He walked down his own gravel lane in a t-shirt with a 5-foot aluminum prism pole in his right hand, held down at his side like a walking stick, and he stopped at 40 feet, which he had chosen because it is far enough that nobody feels crowded and close enough that a shotgun microphone in a fence post picks up a whisper. "Evening," he said. "You son of a bitch," Kurt Tillman said. "That's fair." That threw them. Ockham said afterward that you could feel the whole thing lurch. 6 men who had driven out there on a rehearsal of a scene that the other guy refused to be in. "My boy is 19 years old," Tillman said, "and he's in a cage." "Yes, sir. You did that." "No, sir," Kellen said. "He did that, in a bathroom, on the 14th of March, and then your school board voted for 4 years running on a grant that paid a man to write down that it didn't happen. And you were the president of that board, and you signed the assurance page. I've got a copy. Your signature's on the line that says the data is true and complete. Nobody said anything." "I'll tell you the part you actually came here about," Kellen went on, in the same flat voice, "because I don't think you know it yet, and I'd rather you heard it from me than from your lawyer at $400 an hour. Your insurance is gone. Not the district's. Yours. Your homeowner's policy has an intentional acts exclusion, same as everybody's. When my attorney amends the complaint on Thursday to name you personally as a board officer, there is no company standing behind you. It's your house. It's the dealership. It's the lake place. He let that sit. That's why you're standing in my lane at midnight with a bottle in you, not because of your son. Because a man in Columbus with a spreadsheet did to you exactly what you paid a principal to do to my kid, and now you know what it feels like to be a number somebody decided to write down honestly. Jared Vandermeer raised his rifle. Not to the shoulder. Just up, off the leg, muzzle at about a 45, the way a scared man does it. Kellen Ledbetter did not move at all. "Coach," he said, "there are 4 trail cameras on this property, and there's a thermal drone 1,100 feet up, and you're on all 5, and the drone has your license plates from the county road. Now I'm going to tell you something, as one man to another, and it's the only favor anybody is going to do you for the rest of your life." He tipped his chin, very slightly, toward the barrel. "That's an aggravated menacing charge right now. 2 years. You pointed another 11 degrees, and it's a felony that's going to make the difference between seeing your daughter's wedding and not. You think you're—" "I don't think anything, sir. I measure." Kellen lifted the prism pole about 6 inches, which was the only aggressive movement he made that entire night, and it was not aggressive at all. It was worse. It was instructional. "You're standing 40 feet from me. I've spent 21 years of my life at ranges where that isn't a distance, it's a formality. And I'm out here with a stick. Sit with the reason for that. I'm not out here with a stick because I'm brave. I'm out here with a stick because every single thing you do in the next 90 seconds needs to belong to you. And if I bring a weapon out of that house, you get to share it with me. I'm not sharing anything with you. Not one thing. Not ever again." That is when Kurt Tillman drew the pistol and fired 1 round into the porch post behind Kellen's left shoulder, and the sound of it went out across 400 acres of April, and the dogs went insane, and Kellen Ledbetter did not flinch, and the entire thing, the draw, the shot, the recoil, the way Tillman looked at his own hand afterward like it had done it by itself, was captured at 4K, 30 frames a second, from 2 angles, with the fence post microphone picking up every word that had come before it. "Okay," Kellen said quietly, into the ringing. He turned around and walked back up his own lane, and did not hurry, and did not look back. And the 6 men stood there for about a minute and a half in the dark, and then got in their trucks and left. He called the sheriff at 11:58. He gave a statement at 12:40. He handed over the cards from all 4 cameras at 1:15 a.m., and Occam's drone footage at 1:20. And by 2 in the morning, Kurt Tillman was in the same county jail as his son, on a different floor, on charges of felonious assault and discharging a firearm at an occupied structure. And the tow truck that came for his F-250 belonged, in a piece of irony that the whole county chewed on for a year, to a company he had once tried to buy. Nobody at Cutler Bend ever came to that gravel lane again. The collapse took 14 months, and it was not dramatic, which is the thing nobody expects. Real institutional collapse is not a building falling down. It's a long series of Tuesdays in which small, bored, professional people in offices in other cities read documents and initial them. The state auditor's finding came in September. $2.4 million in grant funds, plus statutory penalties, plus the cost of the investigation, issued as a finding for recovery against the district, and, in a rarer move that got written up in 3 education law journals, against 4 individuals personally: Trent Pomeroy, Denise Kingsbury, Jared Vandermeer, and Kurt Tillman. Finding for recovery is a phrase that sounds like nothing and means that the state of Ohio can garnish your wages until you die. Trent Pomeroy pled to tampering with records, obstructing official business, and 2 counts of failure to report child abuse, which in Ohio is a crime for a mandated reporter, and mandated reporters include school administrators, and it is the charge that nobody ever files and that ended him. He got 16 months. He is permanently barred from holding an educator license in the state of Ohio, and the certificate revocation is public, searchable, and forever. The thing that actually destroyed him, though, was not the sentence. At the sentencing hearing, the prosecutor played 11 seconds of a phone call, recorded by his own daughter in the hallway of his own house, and then read into the record the district's Year 4 grant report, which contained the number 0, and then read the nurse's log of the same year, which contained the number 9, and then said, "The state has nothing further." Renly Pomeroy sat in the second row. She had turned 17 the week before. She testified for 11 minutes, and she did not cry. And on cross-examination, her father's attorney asked her whether she loved her father, and she said, "Yes, and I want him to be a person who wrote it down." And the defense attorney sat down. Denise Kingsbury resigned in October, took the pension hit, and moved to Arizona. Jared Vandermeer got 4 years for conspiracy and child endangering. 2 former players testified about Tuesdays. Kurt Tillman got 30 months for the porch, lost the dealership in a bank workout in February, and lost the lake place in the civil case that summer. Of the 12 boys, Hayden Fitch got 8 years and served 5. Trey Tillman took 4. Cass Vandermeer, who had told the detective on the first day exactly what happened, in order, without being asked twice, got 2 years community control and a felony that will follow him, and he is the only one of the 12 who ever wrote to the Ledbetters. He wrote 9 times. Kellen answered on the 4th one. 6 of the 12, being juveniles, are sealed, which is the law, and which Kellen Ledbetter, to the surprise of every reporter who ever asked him, said out loud that he agreed with. "I wanted the adults," he said. "The boys were the ammunition. You don't prosecute the round." The civil case settled in the spring, with no confidentiality clause, because Kellen refused every offer that had one, 4 times, including one that was 40% higher. His attorney told him he was leaving a life-changing amount of money on the table for a principal. "It's not a principal," Kellen said. "It's a monument. You don't get to pull my pin." The settlement paid for a lift-equipped van, a ramp, a bathroom remodel, a bed that could get his son to a sitting position at 3 in the morning without waking anybody, 16 years of therapy, and a fund that will still be paying for a caregiver in 2061. It did not make anybody rich. That is what these things actually are. And Brant, here's the part I want to be honest about, because a story that lies at the end is worth nothing. He did not walk again. The bleed resolved. The hardware held. He got some sensation back at the very top of the injury, in a band around his lower ribs, in month 5, and Dr. Everly told him not to build a life on the hope of more, and he didn't. And that is the bravest single thing anybody in this entire story did. What he got back was his hands, which had never left him. He went back to school in November of that year, at a different high school, in a chair, with a camera on a strap his mother had sewn. He shot the yearbook there too. He was, by everyone's account, insufferable about it. And in February of the following year, a 15-year-old boy in a wheelchair rolled up a plywood ramp into a hearing room in the Ohio State House and testified for 6 minutes in front of a House Education Committee about a spiral notebook. He read 4 entries out loud. Dates, times, who was there, what he saw. Then he said, "The school reported 0. I had 19. I want you to notice that I was 15, and I did it with a notebook from the dollar store. It's not hard to count. It's just that nobody who could count had a reason to." House Bill 411 passed the following year. It's a small, unglamorous, technical bill, and it does exactly one thing. It requires that any school health office visit involving an injury reported by the student as caused by another student generates an automatic, time-stamped, non-editable submission to the state, which cannot be routed through, delayed by, or amended at the building level. The clerk's summary calls it the School Health Incident Reporting Act. Everybody in Ashfall County calls it the Ledbetter Rule. The last thing. There is a photograph that ran in a state paper about 2 years after all of it, and it's the one Kellen keeps on the wall in the dining room where the plotter paper used to be. It's a soybean field in October. There's a total station on a tripod, and there's a young man in a rigid frame wheelchair with a field book open on his lap, one hand on the instrument, sighting down the line, and he is laughing at something off camera, and his father is out at the far end of the shot, 300 feet away, holding the rod, waiting. Brantley Ledbetter got his surveyor in training certification at 19. He does the calculation and the drafting and the deed research, which is most of the work anyway, and his father walks the rod, which his father says is the easy part and always was. The sign on the truck says Ledbetter Land and Boundary, and under it, in smaller letters that Brant put there himself and that his father pretended for about a week to be annoyed about, it says, "We write it down." Okay. Nathan here again. I've been sitting with this one for a while, and the thing I keep coming back to isn't the night at the gravel lane. even though that's the part that makes your hands sweat. It's the 11 days before it. Because think about what those 11 days actually cost him. He had a recording of a principal covering up his son's assault, in his hand, on the 18th morning. Every cell in that man's body wanted to put it on the internet at 9 o'clock that night and let the world burn the building down for him. And he didn't. He sat on it, next to a hospital bed, while his son learned to transfer from a chair, because he understood something that I think most of us never learn. Being right early is worth almost nothing. Being right at the exact moment when nobody can wriggle is worth everything. That's not patience as a personality trait. That's patience as a weapon, and it is available to absolutely all of us, and almost nobody picks it up, because it feels terrible. The other thing, I don't think this is a story about a father getting revenge on 12 kids. I think it's a story about what happens when an institution discovers that it is being measured on the wrong thing. Nobody at that school woke up one morning and decided to let a boy get paralyzed. What they did was much more ordinary and much more common. Somebody built a system where the honest number cost you $18,000 and the dishonest one was free, and then acted shocked 4 years later at what grew in it. You have seen a version of this at your job. Your metrics are a moral document, whether you meant them to be or not. And last, the part I actually can't shake. 41 kids went through that nurse's office, and one woman kept the carbons in a shoebox in her trunk for 6 years because she was scared. That shoebox is the only reason any of this ever came apart. So if you take one thing out of this, keep your copy. Write down the date. Nobody is ever going to thank you for it, and one day, it might be the only true thing left in the building. I'm Nathan. Go count something honestly this week.